They called him the Desert Fox. But can a fox remain noble while serving a wolf? Erwin Rommel was admired by his enemies, celebrated by his soldiers, and feared by his own superiors. He was a general in Hitler's army, yet later stood at the edge of a conspiracy to kill the Führer, a national hero, and a marked traitor. So, who was Rommel really? A military genius who outmaneuvered the British in the scorching deserts of North Africa? A loyal officer turned reluctant rebel, or just another man trapped by the machinery of war and ideology? This is not a glorification, this is a reckoning. But even in defeat, Rommel earned respect from his enemies. Captured British soldiers reported being treated with decency. He ordered medical care for wounded prisoners. He forbade the execution of Jewish civilians and refused to carry out Hitler's infamous commando order which demanded the execution of captured Allied commandos. He was not a saint. He still served the Reich, but he was no monster either. Allied propaganda picked up on this. British newspapers began portraying Rommel as the good German, a military professional, not a fanatic, a man they could respect, even while trying to kill. It was a rare thing in that war. Back in Germany, Rommel's relationship with Hitler began to sour. He questioned the Führer's strategy. He criticized the blind push into the Soviet Union. He warned about the Allied invasion of France demanding better coastal defenses in Normandy, and he was ignored. Rommel's independence once praised became dangerous. By then, Rommel was in charge of fortifying the Atlantic Wall, the line of bunkers, mines and artillery that was supposed to stop the Allied landings in France. He believed the real fight would be won on the beaches within the first few hours. But the resources were lacking. Command was disorganized. He pleaded for more troops, more tanks, more realism. And again, Berlin looked the other way. Then came D-Day, June 6, 1944. The Allies landed in Normandy just as Rommel had predicted. He was away from the front, visiting his wife in Germany. By the time he returned, the situation was slipping fast. He realized then what many in the Wehrmacht already whispered behind closed doors. Hitler had lost touch with reality, and Rommel made a choice. Or did he? Some claimed Rommel was a central figure in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. Others insist he was merely sympathetic, perhaps informed but not involved. The truth remains foggy, buried in silence and destroyed documents, but one thing is certain: Rommel had lost faith. Faith in the regime, faith in Hitler, faith in victory. In secret meetings, he listened to fellow officers as they debated rebellion. He urged caution, argued that Germany needed peace, but not chaos. Some say he opposed assassination, preferring a negotiated surrender. Others say he would have accepted Hitler's death if it meant ending the bloodshed. But conspiracies are not built on clarity. They are, shadows stitched with whispers. The bomb went off on July 20th, 1944. Hitler survived. The plot unraveled within days. Dozens were arrested, tortured, executed, and Rommel's name appeared. Perhaps because of jealousy, perhaps because someone needed to offer a scapegoat, or perhaps because he had finally chosen a side. But he was too famous, too admired, too valuable as a symbol. So the regime made a different choice. On October 14, 1944, two generals arrived at Rommel's home in Herrlingen. They offered him two options: stand trial for treason, his family publicly disgraced, possibly executed, or take poison, die of natural causes, and be buried a hero. Rommel walked into the garden with them. Minutes later, he was dead. Cyanide, fast, quiet, controlled. The official cause, a cerebral embolism. A military funeral followed with full honors. Hitler sent condolences. The newspapers praised the loyal soldier, but the truth buried with him until the war ended. In time, the real story began to surface. Interrogations, testimonies, fragments of letters. Bit by bit, the myth unraveled. Rommel had not died in bed, he had been silenced. And that turned him into something the Nazis feared even more than a traitor, a martyr. After the war, West Germany embraced Rommel as a symbol of the clean Wehrmacht. A soldier's soldier, someone who fought with honor, who rejected criminal orders, who died for conscience rather than cruelty. His legacy became political currency. Schools were named after him, streets, barracks, memorials. But was it all true or convenient? Rommel's reputation rests on a delicate tightrope. On one side, his battlefield genius, personal bravery, chivalrous conduct. On the other, his service to a genocidal regime, his proximity to Hitler. His silence in moments when speaking out could have made a difference. He never joined the Nazi Party, he opposed atrocities, but he also allowed his image to be used for propaganda. He stood beside Hitler on posters. He inspired soldiers fighting for a monstrous cause. So where does that leave us? Can we separate the man from the machine he served? Can you be moral while wearing the uniform of evil? Can you be a hero if you didn't resist soon enough? Rommel's story doesn't give us clean answers. That's what makes it powerful. It is the story of war's gray zones, of choices made under impossible pressure, of honor compromised by survival. And maybe that's why he still haunts the battlefield of memory, because he forces us to ask, what would you have done? Would you obey orders? Would you stand up? Would you fall in line or fall on your sword? History isn't about saints and monsters. It's about humans. Flawed, conflicted, courageous. Erwin Rommel was all of those things. And that's why his name still echoes across the sands of North Africa, across the cliffs of Normandy, across the corridors of power and betrayal. He was not just a soldier. He was not just a conspirator. He was not just a myth. He was a mirror. And that reflection might be more uncomfortable than we are ready to admit. If this story challenged what you thought you knew, subscribe to Hidden War Archives, because behind every battle there's a man, behind every uniform, a choice, and behind every myth, the truth waits to be uncovered. Comment below with your thoughts. Was Rommel a hero, a traitor, or something in between? And what other hidden war stories do you want us to uncover? Share this video if it made you think. And join us again where history speaks with no face but all the fire.